This is very much going over everything for you to do with the role of the enterprise advisor, changes within the careers hub, what it is that we're all here about and how we work together. If you've got any questions, please feel free to lift the hand in Zoom or put them in chat, and you might find that Dan and Jackie and Emma and Tony are able to answer those as we go along. But also, if anything came up and you had to drop out or something happened with your link, obviously we're recording it, but also we're going to run this session again in the spring term and summer term. So there is an opportunity for you to take part if something happens that you miss most of this one. Okay, so this is basically an overview. So to give you a bit of background as to how we fit the Careers Hub within the sort of national picture. The Careers and Enterprise Company was set up, funded by DfE, to provide that careers support across the country. And when it first started, there were a certain group of schools, they weren't a huge number in the UK, that were part of what they sort of called a hub system. And then you had some that were in the Enterprise Advisor network. Now, those in the hub had a bit more support from the enterprise coordinators, such as ourselves. Those that were in the Enterprise Advisor network, we worked to link them with an enterprise advisor, but our support went minimally beyond that, not as far as it did with the other schools. And then there were a whole host of schools that weren't even part of an enterprise advisor network. And what happened for the first couple of years is they were looking to see whether that hub model, where schools that were getting that additional support were increasing their careers provision in advance of the other schools as well, whether it actually had value to do that, which was found to be the case. Now the Careers Hub system is expanded. So for example, in Somerset, Devon, Torbay and Plymouth, we now have every school across the heart of the Southwest, mainstreams, SEN, also the PRUs, pupil referral units, and the middle schools as well. So they're all invited to join. We've got about 28 that are sort of yet to confirm that they want to join the hub, but everybody else is within it. So the whole point of what we do, and with that funding that comes through from the CEC, it's joining up education with employment. So yourselves, whatever the organizations you're with and the networks that you have, is trying to pull that through to bridge between the schools and colleges and the employers. Also raising the profile of good careers education. Now, Gatsby as a foundation did research a number of years ago and came up with 8 benchmarks that are key for careers provision. They did that internationally. The government then put that in their career strategy. So there's an expectations for schools to work to the Gatsby benchmarks. And then ultimately it's raising aspirations as well among the students within schools and colleges. Now, as a careers hub, we get some funding coming down from the CEC, which has come through from DfE, and we also I've told him to be quiet. So we also have funding from the local authorities and the Heart of the Southwest LEP as well. So all of that is pieced together so that we can provide that greater provision across the Heart of the Southwest. So just to go over the benchmarks for those that aren't familiar with these, and it takes a while to get up to speed with these, and don't worry too much about, whether you have to remember them, because there are careers leaders in schools that still, whenever we meet, go, I don't know what benchmark that is. So it's not something you need to learn, but it's being sort of cognizant of what they cover. So benchmark 1 is one of the focus areas now of the Careers and Enterprise Company and DfE nationally. We need to really try and make sure that all schools and colleges have got a stable careers program. And what that benchmark is all about is having a program, having it signed off by governors, having it really embedded in that sort of background element linked to the school improvement or development plan, so that it's rooted right in centrally within the education organisation. Then the others sort of stem from that really. So you've got benchmark 2, which is about providing up-to-date labour market information to students and also to parents, encouraging them to access that when it comes to the parents and carers, but ensuring that young people within the schools and colleges have got access to that labour market information and are using it. Then 3 is addressing the needs of each pupil. And one of the underpinning elements of this is retaining the data on what pupils have done each year to do with careers provision. So there's a careers record of the employer encounters they had, of any enterprise days that they've done, careers fairs that they've gone to, and to assess with them what they actually need and to adjust the program around them. And also this is about keeping records of what happens to those students when they leave school. Now, up until recently, this benchmark included a question which, if I remember rightly, I'm going to get the wording quite wrong, but my emphasis is on 3 areas that were in it. So what schools needed to do was maintain records for accurate records for all students for 3 years following leaving school. So where they'd gone, whether they'd stayed there. And that, as it was stated, was a huge undertaking that was not really that possible for schools to do. So what the situation is now is that schools need to put together a process which they capture within their careers policy that states what they're going to do to keep hold of student contact information and get permission from the students to do that, what follow-ups they're going to do to find out where students have gone and how they're going to use that. Because on the one hand, they could collect the data, and that's great. They could have masses of data, but it's no use unless they're using it. So part of that is to state what they're going to do with that data looking into their careers program. So for example, if you had a lot of data from students that had left 2-3 years before, and you wanted to drill down a little bit, you might look at all of those girls that were planning to have STEM careers and were going to study STEM subjects, and you might do an individual drill down onto that to see how many of them remained within STEM subjects and ended up in those careers. And you might compare that with boys and what they'd done if they wanted to enter STEM careers, because part of what you're expected to do under benchmark 3 is to deal with stereotypes as well and to deal with aspiration. Those are both captured under this. So you might find if you found from that, and let's take an extreme, that all the girls had dropped out of their STEM subjects that they were doing after school, all the boys are stuck within it, then you might look back at your careers program and ask why, what is it that you could do differently? So it's the process now that needs to be captured rather than simply the data. Gatsby benchmark 4 is about basically embedding it in the curriculum. I say basically, this is a really tricky one to do because in order to do this, you need buy-in from all of the different curriculum areas. And this is where it becomes really key. If a careers leader is not a member of the senior leadership team, this can be really quite tricky to do because they're trying to get buy-in from their peers who might not think that this is particularly important in sort of relation to what else they're doing in the curriculum, particularly at the current moment, because they're playing catch up with a lot of delivery within the curriculum, and they might really prioritize that rather than looking at how they can meld the two of those together. Whereas if you've got a senior leader who is behind this as the careers leader, they're able to expect that from staff and make that really clear that this is part and parcel of the role and what they expect. So then benchmark 5 and 6, this is clearly where yourselves are most aligned. So benchmark 5 is encounters with employers and employees. So this is where your networks are really important. So any encounters that can be sort of in not so much initiated, but any introductions that can be made for the schools and colleges so that they're able to follow them up with a broad range of employer encounters are really important, because you want to make sure that students are getting a broad range of sectors that are available to them for information and lots of different opportunities so that they don't just go down sort of one area where you happen to have really active employers. So they hear about the health sector, for example, but they don't tend to hear about the others. We want that really nice broad spread. And those encounters need to be meaningful. So from your point of view, one of the things is, just checking in meetings really, is if your school careers leader or careers coordinator are talking about activities and encounters, it's working out whether the students have approached it in a way where they can just almost nod towards it and not really engage themselves. So, for example, with a careers fair, generally it's quite possible for a group of students to be taken. They do the rounds of the different stands, they pick up things, they might speak to a couple of people and they don't remember anything about it, and it's not really meant anything, it's been just a bit of a jolly and a day out. Whereas if you do some pre-work with them, maybe in tutor time, for example, where they are discussing the questions they want to ask, which of the stands they want to go to, and then after the careers fair, they then have a reflection session where they have to feedback what they found out. At the careers fair, they've had to engage in order to be able to do that reflection. So it's a way of making it meaningful. Similarly with benchmark 6, this doesn't have to be work experience, but in the main it generally is. It can be when students are going out on a field trip, for example, if they meet people within that organisation they've gone to visit and they talk about those roles and they see what they're doing, that can count as experience of the workplace as well. But this also needs to be meaningful, and at the moment with COVID, it's quite tricky in that there's a lot of approaches towards this, in that we can get a video, we can talk about video, we can see lots of different employers and employees in different sectors, and we can study those a little bit, and that gives us an experience of the workplace that they're in from those videos. But actually that's not meaningful, because again, the students could potentially switch off and there's nothing to make sure that they are listening and participating, and there's not into any interaction, which is key to this one. There needs to be that toing and froing, question and answer. They're actually able to engage with somebody from a workplace, so that's a key area to look out for. And then benchmark 7 is encounters with further and higher education. So they're looking at having talks from people from FE and HE on apprenticeships, independent training providers, so that the students see what opportunities are out there to meet their needs and they're able to make an informed decision. And then finally, obviously, you've got personal guidance. And within Gatsby benchmarks, the personal advisor, the careers advisor, needs to be level 6 qualified. In some instances, there are schools with level 4 qualified careers advisors. Even if they're meeting every single student, that doesn't meet benchmark 6 because they need that level 6. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, the different areas that are being covered. The other thing that's kind of a bit of a help with what we're doing is, now that Ofsted is looking for careers provision within their new framework, it means that schools need to prepare themselves for that. And so our support, both as enterprise advisors and enterprise coordinators alongside with you, is to make sure they're prepared. So it's asking those questions and being that critical friend to make sure they've got the evidence to show if Ofsted were to come in. And I've mentioned in the first point here the Baker Clause. Now, the Baker Clause they're legally meant to adhere to this. It's within the career strategy from government. And this simply is having a policy that states how outside providers, FE, HE, independent providers or employers, how they can get into a school to speak to the students. So what process would they go through? Who would they contact? How does it work? Because schools need to be very open to enabling those people to come in, and that policy needs to be linked to their website so that it's really clear how they would link with the school. All inspectors are trained on Gatsby benchmarks now, so they can ask a number of questions about it. Sometimes they only have a half-hour session, but sometimes it's a couple of hours or more. It very much depends on the advisor. And one of your roles, a bit like sort of Abby, if any of you were in the earlier session, Abby was saying that a lot of her role is sort of mentoring the careers leader and supporting the careers leader. It is very much having that eye on the fact that if Ofsted came in, is this person ready with all of the evidence required to manage if Ofsted ask any difficult questions? So the Heart of the Southwest Careers Hub, just sort of drilling down to us in particular, like any other careers hub across the country, we have key roles, and they are to build networks, of which you are a big part, and then your network beyond that, to support the careers leaders, which is a shared role with yourselves as well, and backing the Gatsby benchmarks. As I say, we've gone through those, but I would say the Gatsby benchmarks are quite binary. So they are largely ticking boxes of, yes, we've done this, yes, we've done that, we've got that strategy, we do it across the curriculum. But it's always good to be mindful of, what are the outcomes of that? What are the students getting from this? And just to, ask those questions gently within meetings as well, to make sure that it's not just a ticking box exercise, and it is more than that. They're actually thinking about what the students are getting out of it. Jackie mentioned our team setup, but just to go through it quickly, Victoria Gage is her name's disappeared on my screen, but she's a senior manager, and she oversees the Careers Hub. And then you've got Nikki, who deals with Plymouth and Torbay, and Joe, who deals with Devon. And they're both my equivalents that I sort of manage the Somerset team. So we have an overview of each of those geographical areas, but we also deal with the further education colleges as well. So the teams that work with us, they work with the mainstream schools, the middle schools, the SEN, and the pupil referral units. So any of you from Plymouth and Torbay, you will be linking with your enterprise coordinator, who will be Claire or Caroline or Simon. If you're in Somerset, it will be Emma, Rosa, Dan or Jackie. And if you're in Devon, it will be Anne or Ben or Tony or Sandra. And if it is an FE that you're linked with, then it will be Joe, myself or Nikki. So where are we now? Just to give a bit of a baseline, I've mentioned that all of the schools have now been invited to join the hub. So at the moment, we've got 129 schools and colleges in the hub, and the 28 remaining, they've all been invited. So there's a number of conversations going on for them to sign the MOUs to join the hub, so that we can support them as much as we possibly can with the funding that we have available. We've got 94 enterprise advisors at the moment. You can see we do need more, as Jackie mentioned earlier, if you're in that session. So if you do know of anybody who might be interested in the enterprise advisor role, then please feel free to pass them the information about what the role entails if they're interested. The other thing that we also run, which we've always called Give an Hour volunteers, is very much for those people that are interested in an enterprise advisor role but want to be more operational. So they want to be actually giving talks, running workshops, running enterprise days, really hands-on helping the school. And that role is more applicable to a Give an Hour volunteer, which is very much sitting on a database, and as and when a school is running, I don't know, a mock interview day, then what we can do is go to the database and say, oh, all of these different people are really keen to help. They can do mock interview days. Do you want to contact them? So you're able to sort of plug in with a number of different schools over time. And if you're not available, then it doesn't matter. But if you are, then you can do that. Whereas an enterprise advisor is much more of a sort of one-to-one relationship with the careers leader, and it's strategic in its role. You might decide to do some operational elements, but that's not required of the role. That's something additional that you might decide to do. And then finally, we've got over 10 Cornerstone employers, which I'll mention in a little bit more detail in a sec. So just to give an example of why it's important to be in the Careers Hub, as I mentioned, originally we were trying to see whether the Careers Hub model worked. So down the left, you can see all of the 8 Gatsby benchmarks, and then the top bar in each case, the lightest blue, shows how many schools are meeting 100% on the Gatsby benchmarks for those that aren't in the network. If they're in the network but not in a hub, that's the next blue line along. And then finally, those that have been in hubs that were established at the start of this, you can see that the number that are meeting the Gatsby benchmarks is much higher. So the hub model was evidenced as being really valuable and effective. This is the Cornerstone Employers. So we have a number of key employers, and they are sort of more involved with us, providing additional support from their point of view. And one of the key things that they will look at is providing additional enterprise advisors. So they will promote that within the organisation. Now, we're not taking on any additional Cornerstone employers, but that's not to say if there's another big employer that comes along that says, you know, I'd really like to plug into this, we can have a number of different enterprise advisors from any business that can work with the schools and colleges across Devon, Somerset, Torbay and Plymouth. So our future targets, now this is this is key. So all of you are sort of signed up to be involved with this and you're helping towards this. So 100% of schools and colleges matched with an EA. So clearly you've got the matches that you have, but as I've mentioned, we do need additional EAs. So it's always good in any way if as an EA, you can act as an ambassador for the role and recommend it to anybody that might be interested. All hub schools and colleges should be completing a Compass report termly. Now, for those of you that haven't worked with a school completing a Compass report, basically they work through each of the Gatsby benchmarks and there's a number of different questions and they answer yes they've done that, no they've not done that, or what proportion of students might have done it, working through it benchmark by benchmark, and then you get a figure at the end of how close to meeting each benchmark you are. Now what we want is all schools to be at 100% on every benchmark, and the same with the colleges ideally. But in order to know that and to assess it, we need them to complete those Compass reports. So ideally, termly, but at the very least, autumn term and at the end of the summer term. So our actual targets, which we want to shoot beyond, but for benchmark 1, so that's the bit where you're anchoring it in the school, it's all that strategic level programs and policies. We want 95% of schools and colleges achieving that by the end of this year. Benchmark 5, which is the employer encounters, that's 80% of schools and colleges achieving that. And the experience of the workplace, which largely is work experience, is 70% of schools and colleges achieving it. So that's why we're working so hard on virtual offers and helping people to link in with the virtual offers so that they can meet that, because COVID has meant there's been a bit of a drop off. And ideally, we would like every school to meet all 8 benchmarks, but we're looking at an average of 6 benchmarks fully achieved by each school and college by the end of this academic year. Now that does fluctuate, so it's not a case of, on each of these benchmarks it says achieving rather than achieved, because depending on what happens, you could meet 100% across all of them with your school, and then COVID comes along, for example, and you dip down on benchmark 5. So you would have got your 100% certificate for the school, but it then goes down beyond it. So it's constantly looking to achieve that level. And I think realistically, it wouldn't be at 100% for every school across the board at all times, but these are our targets for this year. And then from the CEC, there are certain areas of support that are provided. So there's a number of sort of training and CPD resources, but Careers Leader Level 6 training, the DFE has provided large tranche of funding to enable that. So we're offering that out to the careers leaders in schools, and it can be more than one member of staff in a school that has that. So you could have a careers coordinator, for example, and a careers leader both do that level 6 training. It's not restricted to one person within a school, and we can draw down that funding for the school to be able to do that. The CEC also provides regular careers leader resources newsletter to let them know what resources are now available. And also there's the Compass tool and the Compass Plus tool. Again, as I've mentioned, they will measure how the school is doing on each of the benchmarks, and Compass Plus will also enable them to track each student. It will pull down all the details for each student, and they'll know everything they've done to do with careers over the time of their being at the school. Previously, it was Tracker that was a separate tool on the system that was used, and that separate tool did keep manual details of each student. You had to key in each student and what they'd done, whereas Compass Plus will pull it down from the MIS system the school has, so all of the students will be automatic within that. We're encouraging schools to use Compass Plus because it does enable them to get that additional data, but some of them will be using other software that already provides that, so they don't actually need to use Compass Plus as desperately some others. So looking at our support then from our side, when it comes down to the hub, obviously we've got the enterprise coordinators and the enterprise advisors. Those are the key relationships. And I'd probably say the enterprise advisor is the key relationship with the school, because ideally what would happen is that we make an introduction, you become an EA, and then you have a relationship with that careers leader of contacting them, supporting them. So when we check in for our meetings each half term or term, you've been discussing things and supporting things in that meantime. And if anything happened in future years and we didn't get funded as we are now, then there's a sustainable relationship within the school between the EA and the careers leader. We also provide a monthly careers leader newsletter and weekly careers leader mailings. So anything that comes our way in the week, any opportunities we'll send to them. Local careers leader network meetings. So every half term we have network meetings for careers leaders. We put on an annual careers leader conference, which actually worked really well this year online. And the joy of it being online is that EAs and governors could also join in a way that they couldn't normally do. We also have local enterprise advisor network meetings, as Jackie's just run for Somerset's enterprise advisors. We've got over 100 given hour volunteers, the Cornerstone Employers I've mentioned. And also we started last year and we're running it again this year, a Governor Forum in Somerset, which is looking to be replicated in Devon and Torbay and Plymouth. And we also sort of try and help support schools to get a careers linked governor. If a school can get a careers linked governor in place, their relationship with you as an EA is a really strong one to develop, because they as a governor can hold a school to account in a way that, you know, we're not there for that, and an enterprise advisor, you're not there for that. We're there to support and provide what we can to help them meet the Gatsby benchmarks, whereas a governor's in a position to try and really get the school to embed it across the board and within their vision and mission. To give you a bit of an overview of where the enterprise advisors come from, 33% tend to be middle senior leaders, 43% are middle leaders and professionals, and then 12% self-employed and 11% on supervisory level. Now, Naomi's left the meeting now. She had to go somewhere else, but we had one sort of example whereby it was Santander had a senior leader who took on an enterprise advisor position, and also had member of staff Naomi who was developing up into a more senior position. So they arranged for Naomi to be matched with a school as an enterprise advisor, and she was mentored through that role. So really the school had two for the price of one, because they had an enterprise advisor who was in that sort of training into management, and they also had her manager that was supporting and mentoring her through it. So it is possible, if somebody you know has got a lot to offer and you can see how they can develop, they could potentially move into a role and you could be a light touch mentor for them if you so wished. So looking at the role of enterprise advisor, and I know that some of you have been enterprise advisors for a while, so this won't come as anything new, but primarily it's building relationships with the school and supporting them and trying to get those relationships with the SLT. So the head teacher and the governors, at least sort of getting some sort of traction. If there isn't a senior leader that comes to the meetings with the enterprise coordinator and a careers coordinator, for example, to try and encourage the senior leader to come to that and encourage the school to get a link governor as well. Connecting with other employers and businesses. Obviously, you've got a network which can feed into the Given Hour or the Enterprise Advisor Network. Giving strategic input is a huge area. So a lot of teachers have worked their way up through school into progressively more managerial positions, but haven't ever worked in industry and haven't got that strategic view as a background. So that's an area where you can really assist and just, be that critical friend that just questions what they're doing and why they're doing it, and maybe reads through any publications that they're putting out for the sort of public and employers to make sure that they are actually fit for purpose. You from where you're coming, or a business expert, so you can look at, again, going back to the Gatsby benchmarks. Yes, you can see when they're hit, but what is the impact of that? What's the value of it? What are the outcomes for students? It's asking those questions and making sure that that monitoring and evaluation has sort of a thread throughout. Critical friend I've mentioned, and then delivery is in a different colour. As we've mentioned before, it's not part of the role of the enterprise advisor to do operational delivery. It's a strategic role, but if you want to be involved with operational delivery, then that's something that you can do. And then clearly being a champion of it to, let people know what you're doing and to encourage other people to take on the role. So why do people do it? Why does it work? The research that's come out has shown gradually over time the number of EAs has increased, and of those that were interviewed, 82% said that the EA had helped them improve their careers plan. So within a careers hub, and having an enterprise advisor really helps with that strategic element. 76% said that they'd help them improve their careers provision, so putting the program together to make sure that's relevant for the students, and 90% were satisfied with the support from the EAs. It's a really nice role because you do get to have that it's, I mean, a lot of roles that I've had previously as well, you have your own targets and you're trying to sort of push to get those targets and to work out how they meet with other people in order to get them through. Whereas our roles now is support. Our role is just to support, is what do they need? What can we provide in order to help them get those Gatsby benchmarks? And I just want to finish off with a bit of an overview of why careers are so important in schools. And there's just 2 slides here of studies of evidence. So back in 2013, there was a study carried out, and they found that by having more careers activities, the students then were better at making careers decisions, and where they went after school, they stuck with those more often than if they hadn't had the careers activity. So their destinations were sustainable. Then 2015, there was another study, and they found that if students took part in 6 different career engagements twice over a period of 2 years, and Gatsby does look at the number of employer engagements that you have, so that's similar to this. What happened was they increased their career development skills and their educational attainment. That's key. That's quite a good way in with teachers across the curriculum, because if they're increasing their educational attainment, that's a good reason to put this in. Those that didn't participate made no significant improvements. Then there's one in 2017, and they found that future economic outcomes were positively correlated with the volume of employer engagement. So the more they had and the higher quality they were, the better their economic outcome. And also a higher number of engagements with employers correlated with reduced incidence of becoming not employed or in educational training. So it's not just having a employer engagement, it's the more they have, the more likely they are to have good results. And then finally, this one, by however you say that name, the economic benefits they found positively correlated with the number of talks as well. So that's a backup to the last study. They also found, and this is a really nice one, there's a good infographic you can find online for this, that students' confidence improved in their own abilities and in fulfilling their career aspirations. They also felt they could see why school was so useful. They increased the number of hours that they revised for their GCSEs, and they increased GCSE attainment. It was an average, I think, of 1 student per class going up an entire grade, and it was most prevalent in English. The direct correlation between career talks and student outperformance of predicted grades was shown. And also, this is really nice, disadvantaged students and low retainers were impacted much more than the other students. So all of it points in the direction of careers being important across all subject areas. And our roles as enterprise coordinator and enterprise advisors is to sort of work together, support each other, support the schools to be able to achieve this. So I know that's a really quick run through, but has anyone got any questions that they wanted to ask? This is where it goes silent. I'll stop sharing at that point. Okay, no questions. Is that just because it's just gone past and you want to go and have tea? Okay, well, I'll leave it there. What I'm going to do is I will circulate all of the slides, and there is an extra slide at the end which has a link to a number of different resources that you might find useful that you could click onto. But if you have any questions after that, do feel free to just throw them my way. And if you're really busy and you haven't got long to write, don't worry about topping and tailing it with niceties. I'm happy to have a bullet point of, I just need to know this, and then I can respond to that. So feel free. Okay. Someone's put, are there any quick wins coming out of COVID? I would say the biggest thing to come out of COVID, and my colleagues can disagree with me here if they want to, but it's the fact that schools had not taken on board virtual sort of access and the technical opportunities because they hadn't had to. So because they hadn't had to, it was something that could always be done in the future. Their learning curve has been like this. It's been huge. But I think what it's evidenced is that if you take a blended approach of using virtual with face-to-face, that will serve them better. So for example, with work experience, you've got virtual work experience, a student in the middle of the Somerset levels could do a work experience placement with a large company in Glasgow, which they would not normally be able to do. And for aspirations, I think that's huge. So with things like that, I think there's been a real benefit to COVID. Okay, any other questions? I haven't missed anything, have I? No. Okay, well, thank you ever so much for coming. If you know anyone, if you are in touch with another enterprise advisor who couldn't make it to this session and they'd like to make it to it, we're running it again, like I say, in the spring and the summer. So just let your enterprise coordinator know and we can sign them up for that. And I wish you all, if I'm not going to speak to you before, a very happy Christmas. Take care.
Thank you, Lisa.
Lisa, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Cheers.
All right.
Great. I'm just going to stop recording. Do you want to stop cloud recording? Yes.